Hey guys, it's Allie. Welcome back to Infertile AF, the podcast. This is episode 14 called Christy. So, because this is the last week of Pride Month, the month of June, I wanted to highlight Christy's story because she was a surrogate for a same sex couple that lives in Israel. But that is not all to her story. She had two kids of her own, became a surrogate for another couple, and then had a bunch of health issues that you'll hear about, and then decided that she wasn't done having kids. So she ended up going with a surrogate to try to have her next child. So she was a surrogate and now is using a surrogate. So it's kind of a full circle, really interesting story. But I will let her say it in her own words. So without further ado, this is Christy's infertility story. Hi, Christy. How are you today?
Hi, Ellie. I'm really great, and I'm so excited to be talking with you. I've been listening to some of your podcasts already, and I'm really honored to speak with you today.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for listening. That's awesome. So, we are going to tell your whole story, which is a super interesting story, the brief rundown, and then you can talk me through everything. So, you had been a surrogate, then you had a few kids of your own, or maybe before you became a surrogate. And then now you're kind of in the next chapter where you are actually using a surrogate to have another baby. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the dumbed down version of it. But why don't you tell me, first of all, I'd love to hear how you became a surrogate yourself and why that was interesting to you and important to you.
Yeah. Yeah. It was something that was extremely important and really life-changing for me to experience something like that. Something just, I felt like bigger than myself and something I'll always be so proud of doing. So my sister was diagnosed with ovarian cancer at the age of 9.
Wow. 9?
Yeah. Yeah. It was really something that it was my first memory, really. All of those experiences of her going through chemo. They did surgery to remove her uterus, her fallopian tubes, and one ovary. And so
that must be ultra rare, right? To have that diagnosis.
It really was. And as a parent, I really find myself like hounding my mom about, how did you know? Because
how did they find out?
It's, my mom said that we were at the pool and my sister was standing on the edge of the pool about to jump in. And she noticed that she was kind of like a string bean. And she noticed that her belly was a little distended. And so she mentioned it to the doctor, and that's it. I mean, they found cancer after running some tests. And like I said, she did have surgery.
Oh my God.
And, that was a time of not really thinking about preserving her eggs. That's something that's more talked about and thought of now, but at that time, that really wasn't. And so they did leave one ovary to provide hormones as she grew, but she never had a period. I knew that she couldn't carry babies.
Wow.
And so it really just, I think, changed the person that I became, experiencing
Is this your older
that.
sister?
And yeah. Okay. She's 4 years older than me.
Uh-huh.
And she has been cancer-free since. So she's now, she's now a registered nurse for the VA and has a cute little Pekingese. So she's really happy. She just got engaged. And
gosh, I feel like I need to have her as a guest on a future episode to tell her version of the story, because that's so interesting.
It really is. I mean, thinking back, as a child, I didn't truly understand what was going on. Like I said, these are my first memories, I remember us watching Drop Dead Fred, and she had just had surgery and was really sore and like couldn't laugh, was holding a pillow to laugh. And
yeah, because you're 5 years old.
Yeah, I was 5 years old at the time.
Wow.
And so it was just kind of our normal, but looking back, she is just the strongest person and what she went through, and being surrounded by the other kids that were going through chemo at the same time. They kind of do these group settings. I remember going to the hospital when she had treatments and playing Nintendo with some of the other kids waiting for treatment. And a lot of them were not as lucky as her. I've always been that person that wants to give and make the most of my time. I know our time is precious and family is very important to me. So she and I have been really close through the years, and I had my 2 children.
Did you have any issues with having them, like pregnancy issues or getting pregnant?
I did not. I had really great pregnancies. I had really big babies. I did have C-sections, which didn't really go according to plan with my first. I was 9 days past my due date and just absolutely the size of fucking Texas. Like I was just so humongous. And I was so hung up on, wanting to go on my own. It was my first time. I wanted my water to break and, all the classic things that happen. And that didn't go as planned. So I was induced 9 days after my due date, 23 hours of labor, and ended in a C-section. And so that was challenging, but thankful for C-sections because otherwise things would not have ended well. So, and then I had an IUD. My husband and I started talking about having another child and thought, well, if it takes at least 6 months or so, we'll just kind of casually try. So I had my IUD removed, and my son was like 2 at the time, I guess. And I got pregnant that month. And so
oh, wow.
It was like, yeah, the IUD was pulled, and then I guess I got pregnant about a couple weeks later. And so Quinn, my daughter, was born, and my son was just shy of 3, and planned C-section that time. And thank God she was 9 pounds, 11 ounces. So,
oh my gosh. Yes, Quinn.
So yes. So we went about our happy lives. I was so overjoyed. I had, the classic 1 boy, 1 girl, perfect age apart. Everything was fantastic. And there was just something in the back of my mind that felt like, okay, this is when I feel comfortable proceeding with surrogacy. So I wanted to have a conversation with my sister first, because she's really the reason why I had those original thoughts in my head. I always thought, maybe I would carry for her. Ultimately, she just wasn't in the place in her life to have a baby. And I knew that, but I still felt like I needed to get the okay or something like that from her, just to not have her feel like I completely disregarded the fact that she needs someone to carry for her if she does want children, and just carry for a stranger, So we did have that talk, and she confirmed, she was not in the place to have kids, and kind of gave me her blessing, which is what I ultimately needed. And I just started researching, and I stumbled upon Circle Surrogacy as who I carried for. And I was immediately drawn to their website. The owner was a gay dad himself, and I loved that they were, really advocating for families that look different than others. And, anyone that wants to be a parent should be a parent.
Yes.
And I just loved that. It felt so right. And I was so excited. I applied right away. I think in the middle of the night. My husband didn't even know that I had submitted my application.
What does it entail just to become one, and what kinds of things do you have to go through? Did they give you mental tests and physical tests and all that stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. So the process in becoming a surrogate is really lengthy. It requires a lot of time and attention and dedication. It's not something you can do really quickly and
Right.
just, on a whim. When you submit your application, they're asking questions about, your financial stability, your pregnancy histories. They obtain your medical records from your pregnancies and deliveries to confirm that you've had healthy, successful pregnancies and deliveries, not complicated ones. So they also do criminal and financial background checks.
Right.
You must go through a social work screening. Your spouse or your primary support person also has to complete a social work screening as well.
Okay.
And then there's also a psychological test that you have to complete after you complete your social work calls. So it's in depth. Being from a small town, I didn't know anyone that was a surrogate before. A lot of people that I'm around don't even know how to pronounce that word. They don't know what IVF is. And so it was all very new, and it was a little daunting at first. But I immediately connected with my coordinator. And I think the relationships that I built with my team at Circle were so important, because it is an invasive process. And someone looking through all of your medical records and knowing exactly how much money you make. I just had to trust that this was part of it, and thinking of it from the perspective of an intended parent, I would absolutely want my carrier to go through that as well.
Right.
To really show commitment and that she is a good candidate, because it's not for everyone. It's not just for people that say, I like being pregnant, or,
right.
Like I want to make money. There are some people that are financially motivated to do surrogacy. So
yeah. Did you ever have any fears that, just kind of jumping ahead, that, once you were pregnant, that you might become attached to the child and it would be difficult to give it to the intended parents?
That's definitely something that a lot of people ask. And it is a thought. I'm not saying that I didn't think about it at all, but I think my intentions of the experience really outweighed those fears. And like I said, I just had to trust the process that, I'm so excited to be a piece of the puzzle for someone to create their family. I mean, it's just really indescribable.
And it's really the most selfless act to do something like that. So it's incredible.
It is. And it was something that I wanted my kids to be a part of. They were 5 and 2 at the time. And so my daughter, she was the little one and thought that I was just humongous and like morbidly obese, I think. But my son was connected to the process. And a lot of people would say things like, well, how are you going to explain to your kids that they're not getting a sibling? And, I think it's about involving them from the get-go. They Skyped with the intended parents. And I would show them pictures of the dads, and he knew that they want a family like what we have, and he knows what love feels like, and that of course anyone would want what we have. This is amazing. So
and what a wonderful thing for your kids to see that mommy is doing the most selfless thing for another family so they can have kids of their own. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was part of the piece of where you don't feel connected to the babies. It's not that I didn't care for them, because I did. And my entire pregnancy, their health and well-being is my job. But it's about the connection with the parents more. For me, it was, that I was so excited. It was different every time I would go to an appointment or an ultrasound. When before it was calling my husband, if he wasn't able to attend, it was calling the dads like, oh my gosh, this is how much they weigh. And this was their heartbeats and, updating them. And I was so excited to do that every time.
How did you hook up with this couple? You said they were in Israel and it was a gay couple?
Yes.
Amazing.
Yep. So they were my first profile that I received. And I was like showing all my this is so bad, but I was like showing all my coworkers and I sent it to my husband right away. I was so excited to finally put faces behind this whole concept of caring for someone. And I mean, it was just the most exciting time. So once you're presented a profile, your next step is to Skype with them if you do want to potentially move forward.
Okay. And that had to be nerve-wracking, that Skype call.
It really was.
Because you're like, I want them to like me and I hope I like them as much as I want to and all that.
Yeah. That's exactly the thoughts that run through your mind. And I remember noticing that one of the dads was an interior designer background. And so I was looking at the back of my house behind me where Skype would be. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. What is he going to think about my house? We need to set up, like, can't have certain things in the background or, so I was so nervous. And now working for Circle, I have realized that the parents are way more nervous than the surrogate ever can be, because this is the person that is potentially going to carry your baby. And that's so huge. It went so well. They speak English very well. So it was easy to communicate. I think we were all a little bit nervous and my husband was on the call as well. As soon as we ended the call, I looked at Andy, my husband, and was like, oh my gosh, we have to match with them. And I hope they feel the same way about us. And I emailed my coordinator right away and said, the Skype went really well on our end of things. I hope they agree. We would love to match with them. And they did. So
great.
They were our first and only match.
Then what happens?
So after we matched, we worked on our contract, which is kind of this lull after all of this action. And it was really hard to not just jump out of my skin. I was just so excited to get started. And so I did a lot of running. I was never really a runner in my life. But after I had both of my kids, I did kind of get into running a bit just for my mental health, to listen to music and, de-stress. Mm-hmm. And so I got back into running and wanted to get in the best shape I could. I knew that they wanted to try for twins. So each of them contributed biology and they used the same egg donor. So they had twins, but they are each a bio dad of one of the babies.
Okay. Cool.
So I knew, I wanted to be in the best shape that I could be prior to carrying twins. Both of my babies were really big. So I felt confident that I could do it. So you go to the IVF clinic that the parents have chosen to work with. So that could be anywhere in the US. One of the clinics that we often work with and that I'm working with for my surrogacy as well is PFC in Los Angeles. So I went out there for my medical screening and
went from Illinois to California.
Yep, that's right.
Did the guys come out as well, or are they in Israel still?
They were still in Israel. So I did not meet them until I went back for the transfer. So I went for the screening and then they shipped me my meds and I went back there for the transfer. Andy went with me and we did meet up with the guys. They kind of took this long trip to see Yellowstone. They went to Vegas and then met up.
We're going to make a vacation out of this whole thing. I love it. They sound fun.
They made the best of their time for sure. And they met up with us for dinner the day after the transfer. I remember our IVF doctor saying, where are the guys when you're sitting here with your legs spread and they're out in Vegas,
They're trying to win the college education money for the.
Exactly. And so, we met up with them for dinner and that was such a great experience. It was a little chilly and we're on the rooftop and the guys were so insistent that I stay warm because I had done the transfer before and they were, so concerned. And so they had staff bring over these heat lamps, and surrounded our table with like heat lamps. And we had a great meal and great conversation. So then I went home and waited for my beta and felt so confident that it was going to come back, with good news. And they were not as positive because they previously were matched with a different surrogate. They had failed transfers. And so they had been through the ringer and been in the program for quite some time. And, I came into it just totally clueless, everything is awesome. And so I just had a different perspective, but I completely respected, where they were coming from, that they didn't want to get their hopes up because they had been through this before. So when they matched with me, they had switched egg donors, IVF clinics, and surrogates. So they were completely starting fresh as well, but just coming from a place, obviously, of reservation. So I got my beta back and everything was great. I had taken at-home pregnancy tests that were clearly positive, but I wanted to be respectful of them, and it's early on. And so I understood where they were coming from. So I kind of had to separate myself a little bit from that, just to give them space and not be, shoving my positivity down their throat too much. Right. So Andy heard a lot about all of that stuff during that time, but and then we went to the first ultrasound to confirm heartbeats at 6 weeks, and 2 strong heartbeats. Everything looked great.
Wow.
The first transfer, everything took, and
incredible. So were they there for that part, or were they back in Israel?
They were back in Israel the entire time.
Okay.
So
gotcha.
The whole pregnancy, they were not there. So yeah, the pregnancy was fantastic. It was such an experience to carry twins that I really loved a lot. When one would get the hiccups for 20 minutes and would stop, and the other one would start up with hiccups for another 20 minutes straight. So, it's just, you can tell when they wake each other up, one will be moving a lot and the other's sleeping. And then you can tell that one boy had woken up the other, and it was just a really incredible experience.
So did you find out the gender?
We did. And we surprised them with the ultrasound so that they could find out at the same time.
Oh, how cool.
Genders. And I did have some recordings of them, singing or reading books that I would play, for the babies, so that they could hear their voices. That was one thing that I always got really snagged on, was like, they're going to be so used to my voice, and then their dads come in and then my voice is gone. And
that's a really cool point and interesting.
Yeah. So that was something that kind of bothered me a bit through the pregnancy. And so that was kind of the compromise idea that we had to, play their voices, and they would speak in Hebrew as well. So it's just really, that was something that I think was important, at least for me.
You had a scheduled C-section, right?
So that didn't go as planned. I was scheduled at 37 weeks, and I started to go into labor at 32 weeks, and they were able to stop it. I stayed in the hospital for a couple of days. They gave me MAG and that medication, I can't remember what it's called, that speeds up lung maturity in case the babies did deliver early. So we did that, and the guys thought, okay, the labor has stopped, but obviously probably not going to make it to 37 weeks. So they moved up their flights. I was back at home, and we were at a good week's gestation. It wasn't super early for twins, but they said, just take it easy and follow up with your doctor. So I went home, I took a bath and just was relaxing for a couple days. And then I started contracting again. And I could just tell that they were kind of stronger, a little closer together, seemed like, a little stronger than what I had experienced before. So we called them. They were actually in flight to the US. So they had a really long day. They had to fly into New York and then have a connecting flight to St. Louis, pick up cell phones and all of that stuff. So I knew that they had a really long day of travel and we couldn't reach them. So we went to the hospital. They gave me Procardia to try to stop contractions. That wasn't working. And with C-section history, they really don't want you to be contracting that much because of your scar tissue, that you could have an abruption. So
was it scary? Were you feeling scared or nervous?
I was 33 weeks and 2 days at that time. And I felt like, oh my gosh, I had never gone into labor on my own. And so I was like, I don't know why this is happening. I felt a lot of guilt. Is there something that I did? Was I working too much? I didn't know why it was happening. I was, like I said, humongous. So I was like, I look like I am ready to pop with these twins, but I did feel really guilty, and I was panicked about the guys not knowing. We had scheduled with the hospital an approval for my husband and the guys to all be in on the C-section, which is not something that they would normally allow that many people in on a C-section.
Okay. And so that's great that they were going to allow that.
Yeah. They were so flexible. And my doctor, I was her first surrogate patient. And so it just was, something that I wanted to experience, that delivery with them. And
so you're nervous that they're not going to get there in time.
Yeah. And I was hoping that, they could stop labor long enough so that they could at least get there.
Yeah.
So that was the goal. That didn't happen. And the doctor came in, and it wasn't my doctor either, who had delivered both of my babies, who had seen me, someone else was on call, and my doctor would have delivered had it been the next day. Mm-hmm. And I was so mad. I'm like, I don't want this doctor. Like, she actually called me fat at one of my appointments.
What?
Yeah. She had said, there was one appointment with the twins that I saw her, and she had made a comment about how much weight I had gained since my last appointment. She's like, you gained 9 pounds. You really should be pushing the fruits and veggies. And I'm like, I do. And that's not something that I want to hear from a doctor.
Not cool. You're like, no. I am carrying twins for 2 other people.
Yeah. I'm eating fruits and veggies, just a lot of them. Yeah. So.
I don't like that. That's really uncool. Boom.
Yeah. So I know. I had this feeling about her. I'm like, oh, I don't like her. I don't want her delivering these twins. I want the dads to be here. But it was what it was. My husband was so amazing. He's the type of guy that will create a playlist. He did that when we were going to be induced with my son, and he's all pumped up and everything. And I'm about to throw up, I'm like so nervous, and he's just that like rally guy. And so he was so positive, which thank God, because I really was panicked about it. And so they said, these contractions are not stopping. Just for your safety, we really need to do a C-section. So within 30 minutes, I delivered. And I think it was like about 8:00 at night, and the guys got in at midnight. Okay. So they did miss the delivery. It was really okay though, because, once I heard the birth weights, I was waiting and waiting to hear, you're laying on the table, and I could hear them crying. And one of them, they said, 5 pounds, 1 ounce, and the other was 4 pounds, 9 ounces. So I could breathe,
Wow. Like, healthy.
Oh, thank God. Healthy babies.
Yes. And that's good for twins, right?
Guy. Yes. Yeah. 33-week twins, and they were both about 5 pounds. So I felt really good about that. I could kind of, go a little easy on myself at that point in time.
How does it go then when they, they do the C-section? Is it like skin to skin? Do they do that with you, or is it different when you're a surrogate?
Yeah, they did not do that. They did hold them up. So I saw them, but they needed to get them to the NICU. And
Okay.
so, but I could tell that, they weren't weird about it. And even after recovery and all of that, you can still see them and, be a part of that. You do have
Did
a
you want
separate
to
room.
hold them? Or would that have been too hard?
I did. There's the one thing that they don't allow you to do is breastfeed. Even if you do pump for your intended parents, some will pump for them, but not directly breastfeed.
Okay.
So there was a lot of emotion. The guys were still not there yet, and but I knew that hospital in St. Louis has one of the best NICUs. I mean, they really were in the best hands. And I went to recovery. I remember saying to Andy, that was the best C-section I've ever had. I feel so good. And so it's just about, the guys getting there. And
had you gotten a hold of them at that point? Like, did they know what happened? They still didn't know. Oh, wow.
Still did not know. And they did not know until the next morning.
Oh, wow.
Because they were getting like cell phone service switched over, and so they just thought they were getting to St. Louis early. They did not know that I had gone into labor. And so it was like just
surprise
me asking Andy a million times, like, have you heard from him? Have you heard from them? He's like, no, I have not yet, but I promise I'll tell you when I do. So as soon as they heard, obviously they ran right up to the hospital and got to hold their babies. And
wow,
it was to see them all together. Andy brought up Dane, my son, and so that he could see, I thought that was just good closure for everything. I didn't want to just come home and not be pregnant. I wanted him to see them with their dads where they belong.
Yeah.
And so that was an important piece for me. And the guys were so sweet, and they like brought my kids little gifts and stuff to just really honor the fact that, that was a sacrifice for my kids too, because
absolutely.
I couldn't, jump on the trampoline with them and, be as active with them as I normally was.
And truth be told, not to get like all super serious, but you were putting your health at risk as well.
Absolutely. It is. It's definitely a risk. And even if you have healthy pregnancy and delivery histories, you never know, every pregnancy is different. So,
wow.
So
it's so amazing that you did that, Christy. That is just, it gives me the chills.
Yeah. Yeah. It really was something that changed my life for the better. And, not that I didn't have special deliveries with my own, but it was just a very different experience. To do that for someone else, it was really remarkable. So,
yeah. So if you don't mind me asking, do you still have a relationship with the guys, and do you like get pictures of the babies and stuff?
I do. They just turned 5, and
wow.
Yeah, they're like these little dudes. They live in Israel, and we've talked about getting all of our kids together down the road, when they're older and they have time to really talk to them about where they came from and their story of how they got here. So I want that to be something that they do on their own time. I don't feel the need for them, to include me in really anything. If the time feels right and they do that down the road, then I will be here and I'd be happy to connect with them. But it's really cool to see them raise them as their own. And that's very different than my family. They live in a totally different country. They have a different culture than what we have. And that's okay. It really is beautiful to see and learn about something, is culturally enriching for me to carry for someone that isn't American.
Right. Absolutely. So this is not the end of your story. A lot of other things
Right.
happened after that, right? So can you tell me
Yes.
what happened after that?
Yeah. So after that, I recovered, I think even quicker than I did, since I didn't have a newborn to take care of. So my recovery after C-section was actually really nice. I healed well and felt good. I was trying to just kind of maneuver through what life is like without surrogacy going on, because it does really consume you and you kind of identify as that for a while. And um, so the transition to, back to your normal life was a little bit rocky for me. It was hard to look like I just delivered twins, but I wasn't toting around a baby. My kids, like I said, were 5 and 2, or
Right.
going on 6 and 3. And
People say stuff to you. Did you get any comments from like strangers or?
I did during my pregnancy. Afterwards, I think it was more in my head than anything, or I'd be like, oh my gosh, they're looking at me like, what is this humongous lady like doing with her kids? Like, I think, looking back, it was really just me. It wasn't, anyone saying, oh my gosh, you look like you just had a baby. Did you?
Right.
It's, of
No,
course.
I get it. I totally get it.
I felt really embarrassed. And my social worker at Circle she said the simplest thing to me, but she said, be gentle on yourself and, remember what you just accomplished. And the phrase being gentle on yourself, that really resonated with me, because that really was a tough time for me to feel like I was in such good shape prior to the pregnancy to, just looking like I just had twins. And so I spent a lot of time with the guys. They stayed in St. Louis in a furnished apartment, working on getting passports made for the boys and all of that stuff. So we spent about 9 weeks together.
Okay.
I would go over there maybe a couple times a week to visit.
And did you get to like hold the babies and interact with them and stuff?
I did hold them. I would help feed them. And we went on a road trip to an attorney that they needed to sign paperwork with. And we went and stopped at this really great bar that has these alcoholic slushies. And so we stopped there and, and
you're like, I can drink this time hanging out with you.
Exactly. And so, and also seeing babies, trying to get passport photos made for newborns is the most hilarious thing that you'd ever see in your life.
I can imagine.
And the guy was like, I can see your hand. And, the dad be like, well, how else am I supposed to hold up a baby and support his head? And
right.
So it was just such a trip. But we spent a lot of time together. And when they left, I sobbed at the airport. I drove them to the airport and just sobbed saying goodbye to them, because it felt like these relatives that were leaving and you didn't know when you would see them again. I just so connected to the guys, and it was just happy tears. And then on the way home, I got a fucking speeding ticket because I was just zoned out, like crying, listening to emotional music or whatever.
I hope you talked your way out of it.
I did actually.
Good for you.
But yeah, it was really emotional. Like I said, in a bittersweet way.
Sure.
I didn't feel like I was giving away babies. A lot of people ask me that, how did you give them away? And I never looked at it like that. They weren't ever my babies to give away. So
I love that.
I gave them back to where they belong. So, yeah, we keep in touch. I see pictures of them, all the time, and they're just so adorable and living their best lives. So
that's so great.
So after that, I started having some issues with bleeding. So I would be on birth control pills And I found that my blood pressure was going up a lot on birth control. So we'd lower the dose and I'd try low estrogen. And then I would just spot all the time, just nonstop spotting. It was so annoying. And then coming off of it, I would have really, really heavy bleeding. And for work, if I would travel, if I'd fly to Boston, a St. Louis to Boston flight is 2.5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I could bleed through a super plus size gigantic tampon and pad and bleed through my pants. I mean, it was really bad. And I'm like, I can't live like this. Something has to be done. So I talked to my doctor and we talked through options. I mentioned an ablation where they burn, your lining so that you no longer have periods. She didn't feel like I was a good candidate for that because of my C-section history. She said they could actually burn right through your uterine wall. So
wow.
Not something we wanted to take that risk. So going back to my sister's history of ovarian cancer, they have found a link actually to the fallopian tubes of where ovarian cancer starts. And so we decided hysterectomy was the best choice for me.
Wow.
So I was, 31 when I had my hysterectomy. We did leave the ovaries to continue hormones so that I wouldn't have to be on any kind of hormone replacement. And so I felt better. I've had an abnormal pap in the past with a LEEP because I had abnormal cells on my cervix already. And so just mentally, I felt a lot better, reducing my risk in that way. And also at the same time, that was a solution to me bleeding all the time. It was awful.
Can I ask you too, at that point, were you pretty much feeling like you were finished having children, or was there any doubt in your mind about doing the hysterectomy?
When I started my surrogacy, my husband had a vasectomy, and at that time we had said, okay, this is going to, the surrogacy is something I really, really wanted to do. That was going to be a third C-section. And so we didn't picture ourselves having other children after that.
Okay.
Financially and physically, we couldn't really see ourselves, getting to the place financially, to have more children. And we decided, we have the boy and a girl, surrogacy is in my future. And so he had a vasectomy and I cried about that. It was it was a sad time. But I felt okay because I was doing the surrogacy. So after that, the hysterectomy was kind of a sad moment for me because it was truly closing the doors of any more children for myself. So I thought, and that I wouldn't be doing another surrogacy. So
if you had been able to do another surrogacy after the twins, would you, like, if everything physically was okay, would you have wanted to do it again?
Yeah. For a hot second there, I almost did do another. Some clinics will work with women with 3 C-section history and others will not. So, when I talked to my OB though, I was having those issues and possibly getting on a hormone cycle again would have worked and been okay. But, I didn't want to push through potentially some kind of medical complication and put everyone at risk. It just didn't feel right, even though mentally I really wanted to, because it was such an amazing experience. And like I said, it is this weird feeling after of transitioning back to life, because it is so rewarding that it's almost too rewarding, because then you feel like you can never fill that void of doing something so impactful, I guess. I was searching for things to make me feel like that again. And
wow, that's so
nothing. Yeah. It's like nothing can really measure up, which is really sad in a sense, because, I didn't want it to take away from my happiness with my family and my job and my dogs and
Right.
like just everything. I mean, it's not that I had a bad life, but I was like, staying up late, Googling like trips to Thailand to volunteer at some elephant rescue and just some craziest things imaginable. And
it's such an interesting point that you bring up, and thank you for mentioning that, because I didn't really ever think of it that way, but you're right. It's how do you recapture doing the most selfless act you can do?
Yeah, nothing measures up, and it's hard to just say, I had this experience, I'm going to treasure it and I'm going to move forward. Instead, I was searching to feel that again. And so that was just, having the hysterectomy, it really closed that whole period of my life where I was really struggling with, what do I do to fill this void and feel like I am making a difference in this world, and being okay with the fact that I just I have this one experience, and that's enough. So I had the hysterectomy, and then this last Christmas, it's like every holiday, I felt like someone in our family was missing. So I brought it up to my husband. I just said, we were on our way home from his parents' house after Christmas. And I said, I really want to look into surrogacy for ourselves, because every time that we do this, we have this amazing day of family and all of this stuff. And we drive home and I'm silent and like feeling kind of sad. And he said, okay, like look into it, whatever you want.
He said, okay.
Whatever. Yeah. He was like, whatever you need to do.
Oh, what a guy.
Yeah. He's very laid back. And so he's like, whatever you need to do. Insert Heather, my surrogate, who is also my coworker.
So tell me about Heather. How did you guys decide to do this together?
I was telling her about it. And I said, I was doing this research. I'm just feeling down about this. And I don't know if this is an option, but I'm looking into it and everything is just falling into place. Seems like it's possibly an option for us to do. And right away she blurts out like, I will be your surrogate.
Yes.
And she is such a queen. She is a 2-time experienced surrogate. And she lives in Indiana. Like I said, I work with her and have known her for years now. And she is just like the perfect surrogate. And that's coming from a previous surrogate. Like she has these like quick vaginal deliveries. She has 2 daughters of her own that are just so beautiful and close to my kids' ages. And so she said right away, and I said, well, that's a lot to take on, and talk to Zach, her husband, about it. And she goes, okay, I will, but I am doing this for you. So we created embryos in February.
Uh-huh.
I had 26 eggs retrieved. We have 12 embryos. 6 of those are really great quality. They have different quality ratings. Yeah. 4 of those are top like A++. So they're really great.
And great cycle. Did you look at the genders of those?
We did not. We did not do testing.
I didn't look at mine either.
Yeah, we didn't, because we're going to be surprised. We all found out, even through all of our journeys combined. So Heather's done 2 and I've done 1. Through our own pregnancies and surrogacies, we've always known the gender. And so this time around, we are not going to find out. So that delivery is going to be so incredible.
Are you just going to transfer 1 embryo?
Yeah. Okay. We'll just transfer 1. And that's something that has been the biggest struggle that I did not anticipate at all. That I'll touch on a little bit because I think it's so important. I was never told how hard it would be to think about your remaining embryos and what to do with them.
Yes, good point.
That has been such a struggle for me. I've talked with one of our attorneys a lot about this, and a social worker on our team as well, because I and Andy both said, we just destroy them. So when you sign on your contract with the clinic, you make that decision right away. They ask you that though before you create them. So, it's something
changed. How do you know at that point?
I know. So, pending we don't use all of the top 4 embryos, I'm just really having a hard time thinking of destroying 3 potentially perfect embryos when I see and hear all the time of people that leave the program because they cannot afford to do another IVF cycle. They're out of embryos.
Yeah.
Or couples that have done, even outside of an agency, their own IVF without success, that are looking for donor embryos. So that's something that we have started talking about. We weren't really on the same page with that. Andy was a little weirded out with, not that I'm not too, but him more so than me, of the concept of someone raising your biological child. It's tough to think through.
It is.
Yeah. It makes you rethink what parenthood is. That's really what I got to, where I said, what makes a parent a parent? Is it your biology, or is it because they rock the baby to sleep and chased away the monsters and helped with homework and, cheered them on at games. And that's really what makes them a parent. So that's what I'm leaning towards is known embryo donation.
So you're set to do the transfer with Heather?
Yes.
Okay.
So we are looking to do a September transfer.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
It's so exciting.
I know.
What a story to go from being a surrogate to then using your own, to using a surrogate.
Yeah.
Did you ever imagine it would turn out that way?
Absolutely not. It's really something I never thought in a million years that would be something that we would consider doing or actually go through with. And when we told our kids, we really had no idea how they were going to respond. So we talked to them about it prior to starting all of this. And, my husband was very focused on that. He's like, I want them to be happy. If they don't want another sibling, that may change my mind. And that is how firm he was on it. And, so we told them, and it was the same reaction that I had, where it was that we never knew that this piece was missing in our family until we talked about it. And the kids are so excited, over the moon, just the thought of having another baby. My son he's like, I don't care if it's a boy or a girl. My daughter's like desperate for a girl, and so that she'd cry if it's a boy. And so that's where we are now. And everyone is just ready to get things started and hoping that TSH comes back normal and we can get on with a med cycle and transfer in September.
Awesome. Well, what a story, Christy. My God.
Yeah.
And it's not over yet. So you have to keep us posted and let me know how everything goes, and we'll let everybody know too. But I just want to thank you so much for all of your honesty. And I know some of this was probably a little difficult to revisit.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing all this with us. And
I appreciate
let me know what happens in the fall.
Yeah. This is so great to hear, everyone coming from a different background and story, and none of them are less or greater or anything. And I love listening to this.
Thank you. Yeah, no
podcast.
two stories are the same. And it continues
really-
to surprise me every day I talk to. It's like, there's things I'd never even imagined that could happen. You know, life is
Right.
so cool. Life is so interesting.
It really is.
Oh,
What a ride. So
What a
I
ride.
really appreciate it.
Thank you, Christy. And we will let everybody know what happens next.
So that was Christy's story. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thanks for all the great feedback we've been getting. And to everybody who's written a review or done a rating or subscribed, I really appreciate each and every one of you. If you haven't yet, hook up your girl and head over to the podcast page and take a few minutes to do that. It would mean the world to me. We have so much good stuff coming up. I can't wait for you guys to hear it. So thanks again. Talk to you soon.